In this devotional, I want to start by giving examples of acting on the perspective of minorities, then how to accept the perspective of minorities, and then go back to acting on those perspectives. Jackie Robinson was a great baseball player, a Hall of Famer. He was the first African American major leaguer. But Robinson couldn't hire himself to play Major League Baseball. He could only make himself the best player he could be, then hope for opportunity. It took Branch Rickey, a white general manager, to be bold enough to hire Jackie Robinson. Martin Luther King Jr. was as eloquent as any civil rights advocate we've ever heard. He made a passionate case for the nonviolent inclusion of all races into the benefits of American society. Yet King could not pass civil rights legislation on his own. It took President Lyndon Johnson to use all of his political will and leverage to get a civil rights bill passed. My point is that those in the minority can only go so far before they need the assistance of those in the majority to complete the process of achieving equality for the minority. Now, before the majority can do this, they must better accept the perspective of the minority. My feeling is that what blocks us in the United States and in other countries is this acceptance of minority perspectives. I will readily admit that I have struggled to accept the minority perspective. Years ago, I volunteered to train high schoolers for a math competition. My brightest student was a junior, a black girl who sometimes found it hard to accept and trust what I was teaching her, but we were making progress, and then suddenly she dropped out of school. She was being pulled by the culture that she was in, away from education and towards an early marriage. I could not understand the values of such a culture, as I felt like a generation of advancement for her family was being wasted. In the years since, I've come to learn that I don't always have to understand the perspective of someone in order to accept it. For example, I've worked for a company headquartered in Japan. Every day, I'm reminded that I'm working with people who grew up in a different atmosphere, who receive different cultural messages, who see the world and see every business issue a bit differently than I do. Even after years together, I can't say that I fully understand their culture, but I have learned how to accept their perspective and work in a way that bridges these differences. Another example. Recently, I gave a devotional called Carrying Hope for the Depressed. In many years of dealing with depressed people, I have found that their perspective is very different. To a non-depressed person, the perspective of a depressed person in their darkest moments is illogical. It has taken me a long time to realize that I'm never going to fully understand that logic, but I have to realize what it is, and that at times I must speak into the depressed person's perspective, not from my perspective. I must trust the depressed person's perspective that it is real and that life looks different to them. A friend of mine recently described this phenomenon eloquently in a Facebook post. The one thing breast cancer searingly taught me is no one can fully understand what it is to walk in your shoes. They might love and empathize with you, and they think that they do, but they do not. No white person can fully understand the Black American experience. So I say to my Black siblings and my Latino siblings and to others who similarly suffer from racism, I'm not going to assume any longer that I can fully understand, nor require myself to fully understand your experience. But just like I must accept the foreign coworker and the breast cancer victim and the depressed person to speak the truth of their perspectives, I will accept your perspective and that you are speaking the truth of your situation. And I say to my white siblings that we haven't done enough to follow Jesus' commandment to love our neighbor as ourselves. As long as personal racism and systemic inequality exist in our hearts, in our community, in our laws, in our lawmakers, and in our law enforcers, we can't claim to be following to its fullest extent Jesus' command to love our neighbor. I imagine that many white people can point to ways in which we have helped minorities through volunteering, through donations, through career assistance, or by simply being true friends and neighbors. But it hasn't been enough. We need to keep doing all that, but there is another level that is necessary. I can't tell you exactly what it looks like or how we get there, but I do believe that this topic must become top of mind, must become a prayer priority, and must arrive at the forefront of our personal and community and national decision-making in order to defeat racism and inequality. We must accept the perspective of minorities, then act on that acceptance, following the spirit and teachings of Jesus and the example of people like Branch Rickey and Lyndon Johnson, who used their power within the majority to lift up the minority. My first ever podcast is on Thursday, June 4th. I want to follow up on this topic by discussing the biblical call to justice, what it means, and how it instructs us today. So subscribe to my YouTube channel now, like my Facebook page now, and let's keep discussing how we can take our beliefs and turn them into a 7-day practical faith.